Are you ready to elevate your fantasy team? Here is Joey the Tooth with your IDP update. If it's not IDP, it's not fantasy football.
Welcome, all you IDP degenerates and fantasy football lovers. This is the first episode of the IDP update with Joey the Tooth. Welcome. You can find me on Twitter at Joey the Tooth IDP. You can find all my written work in IDP Guys and Dynasty Football Digest. First, I'd like to say welcome, like a little selfless plug. If you like the beat that goes into the background of the intro here, Joey the Tooth himself made that. Thank you. Sorry. Something I've been dabbling with a little bit. But let's get to some IDP. So today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about some of those IDP studs and guys with good value that had kind of crappy 2019s, and I'm thinking they're going to have a bounce back this year. There's quite a few of them. I mean, there's guys from 2000 that finished 2018 strong that we were drafting top 10 at positions and top 15 at positions that came into 2019, and everybody was just like, dude, you were just letting me down. But I'm here to tell you there's a good handful of those guys who are going to come back this year, and they're going to eat again. They're just going to eat. So let 2019 be a nice window of buy low for some of these guys, because some of them are going real low. Like, I mean, I'm talking like sometimes even undrafted. So we're going to take a look at some of those guys. Let me just give you a little rundown of what I'm doing with the IDP update these days. So I'm off season. I'm going to be doing about probably every other week, or pretty much whenever I get time to record. I'm going to cover anything from depth charts to sleepers to really anything. Come in season, I'm going to be doing an episode once a week, and I'll be covering start sits, sleepers, injuries, waiver wire, and any listener questions you guys want. So please listen, subscribe to the Big Three Network and Writer Digest Network. Now let's take a quick commercial break, and then I'm going to get right into diving into some of these breakout or bounce back players. All right, be right back. Let me take a minute to explain to you about Anchor. If you haven't heard of it at all, just give me a couple minutes to express some experience. First of all, it's free. There's creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started and be like me, Joey the Tooth. All right, welcome back, all of you nuts. Let's take a look at the first guy I want to talk about here. Call me crazy. Maybe I'm just a 49ers fan, but let's take a look at Quan Alexander. Quan Alexander, he's only played one season to 16 games, and that was his second season in the league, 2016. But look at that season. 145 total tackles, 12 tackles for a loss, 3 sacks, 7 passes defended, an interception, forced fumble recovery, and a defensive touchdown. That's top 5. Easy. Top 5 easy. So he obviously has the potential, and he was doing that next to Lavonte David. Look at his 2019, his first year with the 49ers. 34 tackles, 2 for a loss, half a sack, 4 passes defended, an interception, and a forced fumble. 8 games. Torn pec. I mean, you can't play through a torn pec. I mean, he tried in his last game of the season. So this was really in 7 games because he wasn't really doing anything in that 8th game. But he was able to come back for the playoffs. Though he didn't play full snap percentage, he was able to come back. And, I mean, he's got the potential. So he's coming back healthy this season. He's got a full season, off season under his belt. Granted, it's kind of a washed off season. Some make the argument that it's Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. Fred Warner, for sure. Fred Warner's a stud. Dre Greenlaw, yeah, I am a big fan of Dre Greenlaw, but the 49ers did not invest at all in the linebacker position during the draft. And you figure if they're already done with Quan Alexander, they would try to invest a little bit in the position. Not one bit. They didn't touch the position. So Quan is still in the plans. They still see him as a fit for this defense. So the way I look at it is it's probably going to be Fred running the middle. I was kind of tossed up between Alexander and Fred Warner because Alexander played the middle so well when he was in Tampa. But I think he's going to come off the edge, come off the weak side. So Quan on the weak side, Fred Warner in the middle, and Dre Greenlaw is going to go as the strong side. And this is a team that's got such a strong linebacker group, and all three can cover that. I don't see them using too many sub packages. I think they'll all play a pretty heavy snap share, and they can all cover. They can all drop. So I think Quan is still a volume snap guy. If he can stay healthy, he is a volume snap guy, and he's shown in the past he has potential. I mean, so if you look, granted, yes, he's been often injured, but if you look at a per game basis on his career, even including 2019, he's averaged almost 8 tackles a game. 8 tackles a game. So you figure that's about 140 tackles a year. So, I mean, he obviously gets it done on a per game basis. So he's still young. Why not give him one more shot? And the kicker, on IDP guys right now, we've been running mock drafts to get IDP or ADP data. Quan Alexander's being drafted as the linebacker 42. 42. Come on, man. That's just that's when you start adding depth guys. I mean, you're taking a former top 5 linebacker, guy who's averaging almost 8 tackles a game for his career, still in his 20s, and you're going to draft him as depth. I'm doing it all day. So go ahead and grab Quan Alexander, because I think this year he's going to have a nice little bounce back. I can see 100 tackles easily, and if he's coming in as your LB2, LB3, go for it, 100%. Let's make a shift to the safety position real quick. Demarius Randall. Demarius Randall, he has been, I would like to say, a ball hawk for his entire career. So up to last season, during his first 4 seasons in the league, playing corner and safety, he's had at least 9 passes defended and 3 interceptions per season. Last year, 2019, he played in 11 games for Cleveland. He had a suspension due to a illegal hit, and then the rest was the coach's decision, which I thought was kind of strange, but they opted to go with Sheldon Redwine for the rest of the way. But during those 11 games, Randall had 61 tackles, 3 tackles for a loss, a career low 6 passes defended, but he also added 2.5 sacks. So he added blitzing to his repertoire. So, I mean, Randall goes from being a cover corner to a free safety to a safety who's a short tackler that can blitz. So he's always evolving. So his first year as a full-time safety came in 2018 with the Cleveland Browns. He was a safety 1 that year. He had 85 tackles, 2 tackles for a loss, 9 passes defended, 4 interceptions, and a fumble recovery. If you start looking through depth charts right now, so he signed with the Las Vegas Raiders in the offseason. You start looking on any website you can find depth charts. I think there's one that has him listed as the free safety and Jonathan Abrams as the strong safety. Every other one has him listed as the strong safety. So the fact that he showed he can blitz last year a little bit with those 2.5 sacks in 11 games, I could see Las Vegas using him a little bit in the blitz game. So last year, the Raiders were ranked 26th in sacks per game, 26th out of 32. So the Raiders need every bit of help they can get into the backfield. And if Randall can blitz from the safety position, that'll be a huge boost for that defense, because last year granted they were covered with injuries and they just didn't have anybody there. So his tackle numbers may be a little harder to come by. They added Nick Kwiatkowski and Corey Littleton in the offseason, but Randall should be back to his ball hawking ways. He's going to be good in run support. He's a sure tackler. He's great at the last line of defense. He can blitz. I mean, I'm going for the guy. I'm going to take him when I can, and when you can is late. So he's going as the DB40. DB40. Again, that's adding depth. 2 years ago, he was a safety 1. He's being drafted as depth now, and he's on a Raiders team where Eric Harris just put up 70-plus tackles and 3 interceptions. So the defense obviously knows how to use the safety. So I can no offense to Eric Harris, but Randall is the superior player. So I'm going ahead and I'm going to say Demarius Randall is going to have a nice bounce back for 2020, especially at that DB40 price. Let's make a shift to the defensive line. So the Saints are one of the most complete teams in the NFL, right? Their defensive tackle position last year was a bit to be desired. I mean, they got ran on by a couple teams, but they were missing their star defensive tackle. And by star, I'm talking about Sheldon Rankins. Sheldon Rankins played in 10 games last season, only to come up with 10 tackles, 2 for a loss, 2 sacks, and 5 QB hits. Rankins has had lower leg injuries for most of his career. I mean, I think he's had 3 or 4. But with that said, they shut him down last year before he did any more damage. So he's known to have Achilles problems, but he had surgery on his weak Achilles. So that was finished. He got that done after 10 games last season. I think it was actually after the 12th or 13th game. Then they went in and checked out the other leg, the other ankle. He had something that's called Hagelin's deformity. So it's an enlarged bone spur that causes tension on the Achilles, which hurts when planting and gives a higher possibility of tear. So they went in and they performed a surgery on that bone spur as well. So he should have 2 healthy ankles without any pressure on his Achilles, either Achilles. So Rankins should be coming back. He's already said he's ready for camp. He should be 100%. And he is joining one of the most complete defensive lines. You have, coming off the edge, you have great pressure. You have Marcus Davenport. You have Cameron Jordan. I mean, those 2 guys. Davenport is hopefully to be a stud. He's shown glimpses. They drafted him and they traded up for him in the first round, so he better get it together. He's gone. Cameron Jordan is an absolute stud. The guy has been for years. I don't actually think he's missed a game in his career, and I think there's only 1 game he did not start. And he's a perennial DE1. You throw Rankins in the middle of that, next to those 2 guys, and all of a sudden you get the pressure off the edge. QB gets funneled up the middle right into Rankins' hands. 2018, Rankins, just 2 years ago, before he played all 16 games, was a starter for every game. He came up with 40 tackles, 12 tackles for a loss, 8 sacks, 1 pass defended, a forced fumble, and 15 QB hits. That's not bad. That's actually very good. That's probably a top 10 defensive tackle. And if you're in leagues that start defensive tackles, go ahead and grab Rankins, man. That guy's coming back. He's going to be healthy. He's on a complete defense. And you look at his ADP, undrafted. He's not going drafted. So you could grab this guy, probably your last pick. Nobody wants him. They look at his Achilles. They don't know about his surgery. He's taking care of the Hagelin's deformity. He's 100% healthy. He's gonna be good in 2020. Go ahead and grab yourself some Sheldon Rankins, especially in defensive tackle leagues. He can be a guy usable in if you're just running a defensive line, but defensive tackle leagues, he's a must-add to me. All right, sticking with the defensive line. Let's go look at our jolly friends, the Dallas Cowboys. Demarcus Lawrence, what happened in 2019? You were a stud 2 years prior, and you got outshined, should I say? I don't know. Shown, who knows? You were outperformed by Robert Quinn, a guy who hasn't shown up in 3 or 4 years. No knock on Quinn. He was a perennial All-Pro early in his career, so he has talent. What happened to Lawrence? Well, before the season started in 2020, the guy had shoulder surgery after he signed his massive contract. He had shoulder surgery, and he was able to come back and play every single game. But I don't think he was healthy the entire time. He was battling pain in that shoulder the entire year. And if you're an edge rusher, what do you need for pass rush? You need the use of your arms. You need to be able to swipe. You need to be able to dip. You need to be able to bend. So you're getting underneath linemen. And if you can't get underneath linemen with that shoulder, you're not going to get to the quarterback. You need to be able to push linemen off. You need to hand fight. If you have pain in your shoulder, that's going to be difficult. So even with the sore shoulder, Lawrence came up with 45 tackles, 10 for a loss, 5 sacks, 2 passes defended, 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, and he still got 16 QB hits. You look at it, the 2 years he had prior, when he was fully healthy, he averaged during those 2 seasons 61 tackles, 14.5 for a loss, 12.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 24.5 QB hits a season. That's huge. Robert Quinn came to the team last year, and he was able to produce 11.5 sacks. So that surely ate into the production of Robert Quinn or of Demarcus Lawrence. Quinn's gone. Quinn moved on. He's with the Bears now. He's gonna go vampire Khalil Mack now. Demarcus Lawrence, obviously, with his 14.5 tackles for loss average the prior 2 seasons, and still his 10 tackles for loss this season, he's one of the best edge setters in the NFL, and he can get into the backfield, and he makes great plays in run defense. So he still has that. He's going to come back with a fully healthy shoulder. So his 5 sacks are definitely going to jump. They added Aldon Smith in the offseason, who seems to have his head together. Seems. I love the guy. When he came into the league, he was one of my favorite players. I drafted him in my fantasy leagues. He had 33 sacks in 2 seasons. That's the most ever by a linebacker or defensive end. So if he can, he says he's healthy. If he can come back and provide added pressure off the edge, that's just going to help out Demarcus Lawrence. He's not going to be, I don't think he's going to be an 11 sack guy like Robert Quinn. I think most of this stuff's going to be funneled to Lawrence, but it just adds to the defensive line. They added Gerald McCoy up the middle. So McCoy he's old. He's older, just like Aldon Smith, but he's still productive. But Lawrence is going to be that guy. He's going to be another 60 tackle guy. I'm going to say at least 10 sacks this season. He's being drafted much later. So if you drafted him last season, you were drafting him probably as a top 8 defensive lineman. After that 2019, which he still played every game, he's being drafted as the DL18, the 18th defensive lineman coming off the board. That's insane for a guy who's averaged 12.5 sacks and 61 tackles the prior 2 seasons. So if you want some nice late, like mid-round talent for a DE2 that has really DE1 upside, go ahead and get Demarcus Lawrence, because he's going to be there. People are real sour on him after last season. He's one of those guys that a lot of fantasy football owners, they're kind of crazy. They'll draft a guy, and if they had one bad season, written off. They're written off for the rest of their career with that person. I've done it myself, but I've changed my ways. I try to think a little more logically now. Don't write off Demarcus Lawrence, because his career is by no means over. He's going to come back next year, and he's going to be a boss. All right, now let's talk one of my most controversial guys. I love him. And again, it could be because I'm a 49ers fan, but D Ford. Come on, man. D Ford. Some guys say D Ford's done. He had 2 splash seasons, 10 sacks, 14 sacks. D Ford's not done. D Ford dealt with multiple injuries last season, starting in camp. That quad hindered him the entire season. He had some knee issues. He had knee pain and quad pain, and he only played 232 snaps last season. He played in 11 games, only 232 snaps, which is only 22% of the team's snaps. Low snap count, high production. 14 tackles, sure, not many tackles, but he still had 6 tackles for a loss, 6.5 sacks, a pass defended, and 2 forced fumbles. If you look at that sack rate, that's a sack every 35 snaps. That's ridiculous. That's higher than anybody else on the team. So you look at the state of the 49ers. They traded DeForest Buckner. That's 824 snaps gone, 62 tackles, and 7.5 sacks from last season. Gone. Sure, they added Javon Kinlaw. He's a rookie. Sometimes rookies have a tough time acclimating, and I don't see any of those sack numbers going to Kinlaw. Maybe some of the tackles, but I don't see him being a high-pressure guy his first season. Now, I fully expect Ford's snaps to at least double because he came back in the playoffs. He was able to play in the playoffs, and he was able to make more of an impact in the playoffs. So, on average, through his 3 games in the playoffs, he averaged 51.67% of snaps. So, a little over half the defensive snaps. In the playoffs, he had 4 tackles, 2 for a loss, a sack, and 3 QB hits. Wasn't that great? I mean, Nick Bosa was an absolute baller in the playoffs. But D Ford played 51% of snaps. You put D Ford at 51% of snaps, that's close to 500 snaps next season, if not more. If D Ford keeps up his current sack rate, which I'm sure, I mean, every 35 snaps is tough to achieve. But that sack rate puts him up over 14 sacks. I mean, that's great production. That's huge production. So he had a knee cleanup done this offseason. He says right now he feels great. The knee feels fantastic, and he's fully healthy. Let's look at the team snaps from last season throughout the season. Or through the playoffs, I'm sorry. So this is when D Ford came back and he started playing more. Nick Bosa played 78%. Eric Armstead played 74%. Buckner played 76%. Ford played 51%. And Sheldon Day, your big guy in the middle, played 45%. So you had, for a majority of the time, Bosa, Armstead, Buckner, and Ford. So for Ford to play that 51%, you only need DJ Jones on the field for 40% of snaps, 45% of snaps, which likely means Armstead's going to move inside next to Kinlaw on those sets that D Ford comes in. You did see in the playoffs that they shifted along the line quite a bit. But all that's saying is, all that showed in the playoffs was they want their best players on the field all the time, as much as possible. And their best players on that line, Bosa, D Ford, Armstead, and it's going to be Kinlaw. So you're going to see at least 51% from D Ford for 2020. And at that sack rate, I'm grabbing him. Plus, he still had 2 forced fumbles last season. That's his forte, man. Forcing turnovers. He's being drafted as the DL38 right now. DL38. Depth. People think he's done. I don't think he's done. He's still 29. He's on one of the most potent defensive lines in all of football. I fully expect D Ford to make a big jump next year. So he's a big bounce back candidate for me. Now, Another controversial guy for me. I'm going to claim I'm the biggest fan of Dion Jones. I might have to fight Adam for it, first man IDP, or IDP dude. I might have to fight him for it, but I am going to claim that I am the biggest Dionne Jones truther. So Dionne Jones, let's look at his career. His rookie season, 108 tackles, 11 passes defended, 3 interceptions, 2 touchdowns. Move on to his sophomore season in the league, where he was an LB1, probably top 5 linebacker. 133 tackles, 98 of which were solo. 10 tackles for a loss, 10 passes defended, and 3 interceptions. He played 5 games in 2018, the next season. In those 5 games, he had 44 tackles, 4 passes defended, an interception, and a touchdown. So Dionne Jones in 2018 broke his leg. We're not talking soft tissue injuries or ligament issues, broken leg. And sometimes it takes a year mentally to come back to be able to plant well off that leg. Dionne Jones came into 2019 and people were still really high on him because he finished 2018 strong. He had 110 tackles, 8 tackles for a loss, 5 passes defended, an interception, fumble recovery, and a pick 6. It's not bad by any means, but that's more LB2 numbers. Dionne Jones is still an LB1. Please don't get me wrong. Last year, he had Devondre Campbell, who was in a contract year. He came up with 129 tackles last season. 129. You look at his prior 2 years, 2017, 2018, where he was supposed to be one of the guys, 18 especially because Dionne Jones was out. He only had 93 tackles. So his contract year, he just played his butt off and got those 129. Devondre Campbell's gone. He signed with Arizona. Another thing I like to look at is their sack rate, okay? So in 2017, the year that Dionne Jones was an LB1, a top 5 linebacker, the Falcons were tied for 13th in the league in sacks per game. So they were getting pressure. Getting pressure causes more errant throws. Errant throws from a quarterback cause more pass deflections and quicker throws into coverage, which will lead to more interceptions, something Dionne Jones thrives in. 2019, when Jones' numbers dropped, they were 31st in the league in sacks per game. 31st, second to last. So they went this offseason and they signed Dante Fowler as a free agent. Dante Fowler just had himself a career year and was a top 10 defensive lineman. They added Marlon Davidson in the draft, who can play both on the edge or in the middle. They have Grady Jarrett, who just had a career year, and he's still young. He's likely to even get better, especially with the added pressure off the edge. They even went and took a flyer on Charles Harris, who is out of Miami, and he's a former first-round pick, so if they can even get like 50% production than what was expected of him, that's more pressure than they had last year. So you add that pressure, plus you add a full offseason with Dionne Jones, went through the leg, he played every game, he was good, and then you just add the actual talent that you know Dionne Jones has. And that guy is going to be, he's going to be a top 5 linebacker. I have him ranked as my number 2 linebacker next year. I'm going to call it. It's Dionne Jones. He's going to be a top 2 linebacker. He's got Foyesade Oluokun, who's going to be coming in, starting next to him. No knock on him, but he's not a 129 tackle guy. He's going to probably be back to the pedestrian Devondre Campbell of like the 95 to 100 tackles. So where do those tackles go? Those tackles go to Dionne Jones, who came back from injury this year, hopefully to play up to what we know is Keanu Neal. Now Dionne Jones no longer has to worry about the backside of the defense. They have KZ and Neal as safeties, so that will allow Dionne Jones to be a little more aggressive in his coverage. there's so many factors here that show Dion Jones going back to LB1 status and a top 5 linebacker. He's being drafted as the LB11. I'm taking him. That's almost the last LB1 taken in 12-team leagues, and I'll be the one that takes him early. I'll jump on him, or I'll wait and grab another linebacker, and I'll have 2 LB1s. So do what you want with that, but all these guys, Dion Jones, D. Ford, Demarcus Lawrence, Demarius Randall, Quan Alexander, and Sheldon Rankins. These are all guys who are poised to have a good bounce back year, and their ADPs are much lower than they should be. So, guys, please take a look into these guys, and if they're there later than they should be for you, go ahead and draft them. Okay? Well, I want to say thank you guys for joining me. That's going to be my first episode of the IDP update. Make sure you subscribe to Writer Digest. That's REITER Digest Network on YouTube, as well as the Big 3 Network. Follow the IDP update on Twitter at the IDP update, and follow me on Twitter at Joey the Tooth IDP. We have the IDP Invitational coming up next week. We've raised over $1,000 for Autism Speaks. Have a giant IDP tournament. If you were not able to get in, we have plenty of eliminators still open. Contact at Seahawks Dan. He can get you into them. You can find all my written content on Dynasty Football Digest and idpguys.org. Subscribe to IDP Guys and DFD. I mean, we have all sorts of tools. We have ADP, which I've been using here. We have it's combined IDP and offense. Then we have rookie ADP. We have rankings, which we're up over 700 players for combined rankings. We have a Dynasty Trade Calculator with dynastytradecalculator.com. Subscribe to them because they are using our ADP values and they've inputted it into the Dynasty Trade Calculator. If you want to check it out, I just wrote an article on it and I used some values to show some of the trades you can get with IDP and offense and IDP. It's unbelievable. With that said, thank you for joining me on the IDP update, and I will see you for the next episode.
This has been a collaboration between the Big 3 Network and the Writer Digest Network. Follow at Big 3 Network on Twitter to find more great audio podcasts, and subscribe to the Writer Digest Network on YouTube for tons of league-winning fantasy football video shows.